So last time we looked at empty categories, right? We looked at two examples in particular, two types of empty categories in English. One is what we call pro. This is the big pro, right? Pro here stands for silent, stands for a silent pronoun, right? A pronoun that you don't see or you don't hear, so silent, right? A pronoun that you don't see or you don't hear, but we assume that it's there because we see the fuller clause, right? And typically the pro is in what we call the small clause. Remember the small clause? A pro usually appears in a small clause, right? A clause that looks like a full clause, but it lacks the tense or it lacks the main verb, like that, okay? Like this one, to walk around Hanyang is refreshing. So here, to walk around Hanyang is a small clause, but it just lacks one subject, right? So that subject is the pro. We say that it's a pro because it could be for me to walk around Hanyang, like that. So pro is missing there. It could be for me, for him, for everyone, like that, right? So this is what we call a pro. We assume that it's there, okay, because of the possibility of it being there. And then, or I hope to be the president. In this case, the subject of be is missing, right? But we assume that the subject of be is I, because it's I who will be the president, right? So there is a small clause here, and then there's a pro here that's missing, but we assume that it's there, okay? So that's what we looked at last time. We call this one type of empty category, which is a pro. Pro just refers to a pronoun or a noun phrase, okay? And another type of empty category is what we'll call a trace, okay, a trace. A trace is a little bit different from a pro. A trace is what is left. What's left? What is left behind? What's left behind? But that thing is invisible. Invisible, but it's there. Okay? A trace is what's left behind. It's invisible and it's inaudible, meaning you don't hear. It's inaudible. But we assume that it's there because of some evidence. So what we'll do is we'll look at some examples of trace, and then we'll see how the trace might be seen using other evidence. Okay? So I will refer to the PowerPoint from last time. A trace, again, is an empty category that occupies a position because it's left there, right? It's left, what is left behind. And then traces are used in the account of WH movement in questions and in relative clauses. So I will just pay attention to relative clauses now, okay? So a relative clause is a clause that has a relative pronoun. Who, whom, which, where, like that, okay? So here, the woman who I met this morning came from Mars, okay? So you have a main clause, right? The main clause is the woman came from Mars. Everyone agrees that, right? The main clause is the woman came from Mars. And then you have this, what we call the embedded clause, right? Another CP with I met this morning, right? Who I met this morning. So in this case, there could be two original sentences. The woman came from Mars, and I met the woman this morning, right? So here, I underline the woman here, and I replace it when I want to combine the two sentences. I replace that repeated noun phrase with who, right? So I replace the woman with who, and then when I combine the two sentences, I have who here. The woman who I met, and then this, I met the woman is gone because we substituted with who, and then we move who to this position, okay? So this is what it means by trace. So the trace is what is left there, but we don't see or we don't hear. And you move that woman, the word woman or the word who that you replace it with to this position. So this is where the trace is. Okay? So the T here is there. The trace is what's left behind after you move the who. First, you substitute the word, the woman, with who, and you move the word who to this position, right? So that's what we mean by a trace. In writing, you will not see this. In writing, you will not see the trace, or in speaking, you will not hear the trace, but it's there, okay? As a result of the movement of the WH word. Here. Who does Sungmin, this example, want to be his girlfriend? Who? Here, again, Son Ji-yeon, right? So here, let's suppose that that's the answer, or that's the original clause. So he wants this person to be his girlfriend. So there is that noun phrase here. But when you want to make it into a question, you replace it with the word who, right? You replace this noun phrase with the word who, and you just move the word who to the front, right? So again, there is a trace there because you replace it with the word who, and you move it to the front. So who appears here instead of the original place here, okay? So we assume that there's a trace there, okay? And my reason for assuming that there's a trace there is that notice that you cannot say, who does Sungmin wanna be his girlfriend? You cannot say that. This is like contraction, right? You cannot say that because the trace, what's left behind, blocks it from contracting. So we have to assume that there's something there, or else you would be able to say wanna, right? As in, I wanna go, like that. So in this case, the trace blocks the wanna from being contracted. So that's the evidence that there is a trace, even though we don't see or we don't hear it, okay? So again, this is a trace, okay? Let me go over this. So how is a pro different from a trace? For a pro doesn't block the contraction. I want to go. We assume that there's a pro here, which is me, right? I want and I go, right? So in this case, you can say, I want to go. So a pro doesn't really block the trace. So it's not left behind like a trace. But when you have a trace, I want him to go. I want who to go. Who do I want? And then the trace to go. Here, you cannot say, who do I want to go? So a trace blocks the contraction of wanna. So this is a property that distinguishes a pro from a trace. So a trace is something that's real, even more real than the pro, in the sense that it can cause there to not be the blocking, okay? But for the pro, you can do the combination or contraction, okay? So that's why we just named them differently. But essentially, they are almost the same thing. They are empty categories. But we name them differently because one blocks the combination or the contraction, and the other one doesn't. So we just call them differently. But they are essentially almost the same thing. Okay? And now, in this one, this is kind of hard to see, very hard to see, because in who said that, okay? This one, you don't really see the movement. Because if the original sentence is John said that, then you replace John, right, with who, and you get the same result, who said that. You don't really see the movement. In the previous example, Sungmin's example, you see the movement because who used to be here. Sungmin wants who to be his girlfriend, and it turned out to be who does. So you see the movement from this position to this position. You really see it, the movement. But in this case, you don't really see it because it just happens to be the same position. So what we'll do is we'll assume that there is movement also. Because when we, in theory, when we assume that something happens, we have to assume that it happens in every case unless there's a reason not to say that, right? So in this case, we will also assume that there is a trace. But is the trace like, so if it's John said that, so you replace John with who? And then there's a trace there, and then you move it, but it's still the same position in writing or in speaking. So who said that is the same, but we would say that there is a trace there still, okay? I know that this is hard to see, but it's just because we assume that there is the movement of the WH word in other instances. So we'll have to assume the same thing in this instance. When the WH word is the subject, it's hard to see the movement. The small clause. The small clause is a clause that doesn't have the tense or doesn't have the subject, right? The subject pro. In this case, the small clause is the cat catch the bird, right? Which is here, right? So that's your small clause, which is a CP, right? So the CP is there. So this one is an embedded example. So we have the main clause being, here is the kids. And then the VP has the V as saw, and then your CP, like that, right? And then in this CP, you don't have a tense verb. Catch there is an infinitive. You don't have the tense. So it's going to be a C and S. NP, VP, we have the cat here, and then V catch, and then NP, the bird, like that, right? So that's what we have here. So this is what we call a small clause. In this case, the small clause has the NP subject, but it doesn't have a tense verb. The verb is, the tense is missing. Catch is just an infinitive, right? You have see someone do something or see someone doing something, right? So far so good for that example. You didn't do number 3? I want there to be a rainbow in the sky. We didn't do that one. I want there to be a rainbow in the sky. How would you draw a tree for that? I want there to be a rainbow in the sky. So again, there is a small clause here, right? Small clause has a verb in this case, but the verb is not tensed, right? So the verb, the small clause is here, okay? And you have what we call people call it a dummy. Dummy meaning something that's there but doesn't do the job. So there is the dummy subject. It holds the place of the subject, right? So this is going to be kind of similar to the previous one that we saw. So we have S going to NP and VP. So there's I there. And then for the VP, we have want. And then CP, we have C, and then S. So the subject of this sentence is, I don't know, there. And then the V to be, and then NP, a rainbow, right? And then PP, in the sky, like that. So the word there holds the place of the subject, okay? I want there, and then to be is just your verb phrase that doesn't have a tense. Okay. This is S, right? Questions? So next one is more difficult. They wonder which animal the lion will devour. Devour is to eat, right? So they wonder which animal the lion will devour. That one, okay? Right? That one. Now, in this case, what do you see? Do you see the WH word? When we see a WH word, what do we assume? We assume that there's a movement, right? There's movement of the WH word. So if you look at the word which animal as a group, right? Which is a kind of a determiner, right? So which animal? So it moves from where? It moves from where? In this case of a, I don't know, an indirect question, it moves from where? It moves from they wonder the lion will devour which animal, right? For example, you can have an answer like the lion will devour the cat, the lion will devour the bird, like that. So this has to be from there, right? So the lion will devour which animal, right? You can ask that kind of question. So it got moved from that place as the object of devour. Devour what? Devour which animal, right? So we'll say that when it's moved, there is a, what is left behind, we call it a trace, right? There's a trace there, right? That we have to indicate that it's there, but even though we don't see, it's an empty category. So if you have to write out that they wonder the lion will devour which animal, just start with that. Start with the regular clause before it moves. So we start with the regular clause like this, right? So this is just the pronoun they, right? And then the verb is wonder. And then we'll have the CP, C, and then S here, and then NP and VP, just like we normally do, okay? Now, we'll just write the original version, which is the lion is an NP, and then will is an ox, and then devour is the verb, like that. And then which animal, right? Just like will devour a lion, a cat, a bird, and so on. So which animal will be an NP consisting of a determiner which, and then noun, animal, right? Like that. This is like the original before the movement, right? The original sentence. They wonder the lion will devour which animal, okay? Devour the cat, devour the bird, devour the man, whatever, right? Now, when you do an indirect question, you move the WS chunk, a group, to wherever, right? To wherever. So in this case, we'll just indicate the movement by using the T, a trace. And then we'll just move that to, where should we move it to? It should be the same word order. So they wonder which animal. So it has to be around there. So maybe here. We cannot notice that I don't have the landing site as the C. Even though it's empty, we don't have it as the landing site because C is a word, right? Complementizer is a word like that, whether, or for. But here it's a noun phrase. You see that? So it cannot have the C as the landing site because C is just a word like V. V is a word, devour. But VP is a group of words like this. Will devour what? So C cannot be the slot, cannot be the landing site even though it's empty because it's just a word. Like the word that, the word whether. So this is a phrase. The whole phrase moves, right? The whole phrase moves to this position. So you can have one more branch for that. For that thing. And then what's left is a trace. Okay? And then we'll fill in the C later on with some other words. We'll look at number 7 next. Number 7, the first one. I wonder who John likes. Can you draw the tree for that one? I wonder who John likes. So first, draw the original sentence. The original sentence is the sentence without the movement. I wonder who John likes. So where do you think who originates in? If you don't know the answer to that question, the origin of who, you can supply the answer. Try supplying the answer. John likes Mary. John likes who? John likes whatever, right? So that's the origin of who. So we have I wonder who John likes. So where do you think who originates from? Who has to be the object, originally the object of likes, right? John likes who, right? John likes who, right? John likes Mary, John likes someone. So John used to be here, but it moves, leaving a trace behind, right? The trace that we don't see, but assume that it's there, theoretically speaking. So in this case, we can draw a tree for the sentence. So we'll have same thing. So this is I, and then wonder, and then CP, CS, NP, VP. John is here. And then the V is likes. And then the original position of who is here, right? It's an NP. Who. So that's the original position. John likes who, right? John likes Mary, John likes Barbara, whatever. And then that who got moved, right, to this position in front of the C. So we have I wonder who John likes as a result, leaving a trace there. Okay. Again, the word who cannot cannot land in the C position because C is a word, just like V is a word. So you cannot have a phrase there under the V. So C is a word like that, whether, and something else. So this is the tree for I wonder who John likes, okay? Now, let's try the next one. I think it's I wonder who likes John. I wonder who likes John. Now, in this one, you have to think about the original position of who, but it's kind of harder to see than this one, right? I wonder who likes John. So where's the position of who? It's something that you cannot see, right? I wonder who likes John. Now, if you compare, in the first one, it's easy to see John likes who, right? John likes Mary and so on. But this one, let's say that if it's Mary likes John, Barbara likes John, it's not in the back side for sure, right? Because this is the end of it. John is the object of like. So it has to be here. Barbara likes John, Mary likes John, and so on. So we would assume that something moves from that position to this position. But again, it doesn't appear when we write it or when we listen to it because it's almost the same position. This is just our theoretical assumption. We assume that it moves because we assume that in other cases, the WH word moves. So in this case, it has to move also because there's no reason to think otherwise, to think that it doesn't move. Unless there's a reason to think that it doesn't move, we'll have to just be uniform in our theory. So there's a trace there that we don't really see. This one is the hardest because we don't see, and the board position is the same. In the first case, I wonder who John likes. The word position can tell you that, well, it moves from here to there. But in the second one, the position in writing or in speaking is exactly the same. So we don't see. But we'll assume that it moves. So it's same thing. So NP and VP. So I is here. Wonder. And then CP, CS, NP, VP. So we'll assume that it moves from this position, let's say Mary or something, right? So Mary, and then V and NP, likes, and then John is here. So we assume that that whole thing moves, leaving a trace to this place. So if you write it out on the tree, it's more clear than on the paper, on the page, that actually it used to be here and it got moved to this position, right? So it could be Mary, it could be anyone, Mary or whatever, right? Barbara, like that. So the tree would help us visualize the movement steps and so on. I'll give you 5 minutes to do number 6. Which person to love can be a really difficult question. When you see the WH word, again, something has to move, right? Something moves out from its original position. And in this case, you have a small clause again, but in the front. So can you draw a tree for that one? So where is the small clause here? Which person to love, right? You see that it's a small clause because of the missing of a tense verb, right? So like that, okay? So in this case, the small clause, which is a complementizer, right, phrase here, is in the front rather than in the back that we already saw. So the original, when you see the WH word, there's a movement, right? And there's a trace left behind. So the original position of the WH word is got to be to love which person, right? To love him, to love her, to love that guy, to love that woman, and so on, right? So it has to be to love which person is a difficult question like that. So this one you can take care of easily, right? Is, and then a difficult question here. CP always goes to C and S, and then NP and VP, right? Always like that. And then the VP side, we have the verb to love, okay? And then the object is NP, determiner which, and then N person, correct? And the empty NP here is just the pro, right? And C can be filled by any word, like for Songmin to love which person is a difficult question, like that, right? So for someone, for me, in this case it's just a pro, right? Because it's unfilled. So we'll have to move which person to the front, okay? Leaving a trace. Leaving a trace, and we move it to here, to this. Make another branch out of that. So if I have this type of question on your test, can you do it? Yes, right? Not difficult? We'll do more practice as homework maybe next week. And next week we'll move on to a new chapter also. So I will spend about 5 minutes for review before our test, okay? How do you write the symbol for a lengthened sound? A sound that has been lengthened. Like this, right? X and like this. We call it a colon, maybe. Colon. And then this is semicolon. So we use a colon to represent a lengthened element, vowel or consonant. So when we do a vowel, we just use the V, right? So that's a vowel. And C is consonant. And then you remember the symbol for the diacritic for aspiration? H, right? So like this is superscripted H, right? Super is above, script is to right, so you write above, right? And stress is just like this, right? So let's say this is a syllable, and then stress, you can just indicate the stress above that syllable, okay? Stress is this thing. You know the word voice. A voice sound is like if you have a voice consonant, the way to represent that is just a consonant that's plus voice, correct? It's a consonant and then you have plus voice. It means a voice consonant, right? If it's a voiceless consonant, you have minus voice and C, and so on. Okay? And how do you do deletion? 0, right? 0 with a strike through. So that's deletion. It goes to 0, right? And then this is the voice, and then the voiceless is minus voice, like that. You know this expression, to be flanked by. So it's like this is me, Krista, and then I'm flanked by 2 other people. So it's like, I don't know, sandwich in the middle. I don't know what you say it in Korean, but in the middle. Flanked, to be flanked by 2 other things. It's like in the middle. Flank is like this, your sides, your 2 sides, your flank. So if it's flanked by 2 people, so you have two people on your sides. You know the following sound processes, right? Deletion, assimilation, insertion, and palatalization, right? Deletion is when something that is there goes to 0, is gone. Assimilation is when a sound becomes like another sound in terms of voicing, in terms of place of articulation, like that, okay? Insertion, when a 0 becomes something is inserted when it's not there before originally. Palatalization is when your consonant, especially the S and the Z, becomes more palatalized to like this and this, okay? As in this sound in Korea, in the Korean language, like S or this one, right? This is su, so it's S, but when it's in front of a front vowel, it's she, like that, right? So that's palatalization. Because this sound, because it's in front of front sound, E is a front sound, it has to be more front, that's palatalization. So I'll just give out the test, and there should be no surprise because it's what we already did in class. When you analyze syllables, right, divide a word into different syllables, you pay attention to the vowels, the number of vowels, right? Because the number of vowels will indicate the number of syllables, how many syllables you have depend on how many vowels you have. It's based on the pronunciation, not the writing, right? So the word window is not O and W is just one sound, which is O, like that. So you do the syllable based on the pronunciation rather than the spelling. We don't care about the spelling. Okay? The word church has just one onset and one coda, not two. Even though you see C and H, it's not two sounds, it's just one sound. So be careful, that's what I mean by based on the pronunciation. One onset, one coda, not two, right? This is just one sound because you pronounce it just once.